All right, I think we are good to start. Hello and welcome. You're watching The Argumentative Indian. I am Shweta Kothari. We're discussing a very important and hotly debated topic, and that is with regards to whether laws in this country should be gender neutral. So the topic for discussion today is India ready for gender neutral laws? Now, India is a complex demography, one where women have been traditionally and systematically deprived of their liberty and even human rights by the practice of inane and yet prevalent sexist rituals, customs, and practices. Men, however, are now increasingly becoming victim of counter violence and counterattack. It is therefore pertinent to raise an important question, and that is, should India be rethinking on gender neutrality aspect of judicial legislation? We have some very important and eminent people joining us today who've been talking about laws, judiciary, and gender neutrality in general. Maja Daruwala, who's an executive director of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. Shoni Kapoor is also joining us. He's a legal consultant specializing in 498A, family law, child custody, divorce, and alimony. Deepika Narayan Bharadwaj, who's a journalist, documentary filmmaker, and a very prominent men's rights activist. Dr. Vageshwari Deswal is also joining us. She's an academic, a jurist, author, activist, and professor at Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. I want to first begin by asking Ms. Daruwala perhaps to come in on what do we really understand by gender neutrality? I think the bigger question is, what does the term gender neutrality means, and what does it mean in terms of law? What sort of framework and mindset goes into making such laws, which can be termed as non-neutral towards one gender or the other, or perhaps biased towards one gender? Ms. Daruwala.
Thanks. I have to begin with a little correction. I am not the director of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. And if you've called me here on that basis, I'll have to say that I'm an imposter. I left that 5 years ago after 20 years, but I'm very much connected to it. Presently, I'm the convener and the convener and the chief editor of the India Justice Report. So that's who I am. Just wanted to make that.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you for that.
Otherwise, we'll have the world saying something and somebody shouting at me and saying, "But you're not." Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right. So, gender neutral. First of all, I would like for us to discuss, if it's possible, what do we each of us mean by gender neutral? Does it mean that everybody in every instance has to be treated in the very same way? I don't think that even the law itself looks at relationships in that way. Law has to be extremely nuanced to do justice given the whole context. So neutrality, if it means absolute parity on everything, I don't think is a good idea as a concept in jurisprudence. That's one thing. And then in your opening remarks, you did say men are increasingly becoming victim of counter-attack. Who is attacking these men? I don't see an attack on men. I would hope not to see an attack on women or an attack on transgenders. Sadly, that is not the case. Sadly, we see some groups of people more victimized than others. But in different circumstances, different people or different types of people are under attack. The duty of the state is to make sure that there is protection for everyone. In terms of bias, I mean, I could go on like for 17 hours and 55 seminars on the issue of bias. But one thing I do know is that the Constitution itself recognized the presence of bias and therefore allows us to make laws that cannot be challenged because they seemingly favor one gender over the other.
All right. So I think on that, I would first want maybe Dr. Deswal to come in and then perhaps get Deepika and Shoni. From what I understand, that the word gender neutral perhaps is a very idealistic word. There is no law gender neutral in one or the other way. One gender or the other will always be at the receiving end. That's what I understood from what Ms. Daruwala had to say. I would like you to come in, Dr. Deswal, and perhaps expound on the fact of gender neutrality and tell us what it means for you in a very sort of legislative term. What does it mean to be gender neutral, and does the word gender neutral actually exist? I mean, does that even exist in any country, in any part of this world where you have a law that is absolutely gender neutral?
Good evening, Shweta, and thank you for the question. When you talk about gender neutrality, it means something which is neutral, which sees all the genders as alike. And most of our laws, they are gender neutral only. There are only a handful of our laws that are gender specific. See, we live in a gendered world. Ours is a gendered world, and absolute equality of the genders, irrespective of any considerations, in a gendered world might be a source of injustice. See, we cannot deny formal equality, can we? That is what our constitution declares, that we are all equal, but the reality is far from it. See, ours is a country where girls are killed in their mother's womb. People spend lakhs of rupees and risk getting arrested just to get the sex of fetus detected. That is all because of son preference. See, we have dowry system. We give our daughters, and we also give money to the groom's family to marry our daughters. The girl will work at their place, bear children for them, take on their surname, earn for them, and still the parents have to pay to get her married, as if she is some liability that they need to get rid of. See, this is despite 60 years of Dowry Prohibition Act. Ours is a country where, despite legislative enactments, girls do not get their rightful share in property. One who claims her share is seen as a witch, one who has taken away her brother's share. Even educated girls are scared to claim property, as that means severance of all ties with the parental family. We impose restrictions on our girls under the garb of protecting them. Instead of strengthening our law and safety, we ask them to stay indoors, not work in night shifts. Public places are out of bounds for them after a certain hour. A large number of our girls drop out of schools around puberty. We accuse our girls of getting sexually harassed and raped. We find faults with what she wears, jeans, the size of her dress, what she eats. Remember Asharam saying, chow mein leads to rapes? Who was she with? Nirbhaya was accused of being out with a male friend at night. Now, why was she out at the particular hour? Our leaders make jokes in the assembly. If rape is inevitable, enjoy it. And not a single male called out this innate sexism. We call men with multiple sexual partners stud, while a woman having multiple partners is branded a slut. When a woman wants to file a case, she has to face multiple demotivating factors. Her family is reluctant to support her. The social stigma is a strong deterrent. And then we have the humiliating trial processes, social ostracization. You see, it is not easy for a woman to fight. A former Chief Justice of India, whom I don't want to name, when he was accused of sexual harassment, he constituted a special bench to hear those allegations against himself. And the bench was held by the Lordship himself. And to add to the fairness of the bench, it consisted of judges, not in order of their seniority, but those who were selectively handpicked by the Lordship himself. See, our courts, they work as marriage bureaus. They ask the rapist, will you marry the victim? And I need not say that it is lawful to rape your legally wedded wife. See, our lady judges are no better. A High Court judge of Bombay says, unless there is a direct skin-to-skin contact, it does not constitute sexual assault. And saying so, She acquits a man of charges under POCSO who had groped a minor's breast as he had not put his hand under the girl's top. See, when it comes to victims of acid attack, there is a marked gender skew. While dealing with the defense of grave and sudden provocation, we still apply the test of reasonable man, not reasonable person. Why can't we appreciate the fact that in our gendered society, in our gendered upbringing, men and women, they behave differently in similar circumstances? Our genderization, our socialization, it is to blame for this. So what I feel is that in a gendered society where we are still in the hegemonic grip of patriarchy, absolute gender equality is not advisable, not at this stage.
Okay, so absolute gender equality not advisable at this stage. Deepika, one of the classic arguments, and that perhaps Dr. Deswal also, reiterated in the course of her conversation, is that women are unsafe in this country. And there have been instances on instances that go on to prove that traditionally women have always been at the receiving end. So therefore, when you talk about laws that are not gender neutral, they are usually codified, keeping in mind that women have been at the receiving end, they have been the victim. Do you agree that this argument still carries weight? You're on mute, Deepika.
Well, I have, Shweta, never denied that women are an overwhelming majority of gender-based crimes, and there is no doubt about that. Whatever ma'am has said, there is not an iota of questioning it or raising any doubts about it. We do have prejudices against women. We do have prejudices against girls. The laws have been shaped and formed in the way they have been because women have been on the receiving end for the longest of times. But let me give you an alter thought. The Constitution itself enshrines or says that everybody is equal in the eyes of law. There should be no discrimination on the basis of gender, caste, creed, and everything. Article 15(3) was brought in to make special provisions for women. I completely understand that and agree with that. But these provisions were not made to choke other people's lives. And if somebody does not want to understand or accept that men are being attacked, then I would question them with various instances of husbands being murdered by wives every day. Never makes a headline. We conducted research over 3 months and we saw one husband murder by his wife and her lover almost every single day. When we say we are not really at a place where we need to have equality, are we saying if a man gets beaten up by his wife day in, day out, or gets mentally tortured to the extent that he goes and commits suicide, we should not have any protection for them? Are we at a point where we are saying that if a relationship breaks out, then a woman can go and file rape on promise of marriage because the relationship was broken? But if a woman wants to get out of a relationship, it can be called a choice. I can go on and so forth for that. Every single day, there are cases that come to the fore where there are men who are at the receiving end. But whether you go to a judge, whether you go to a lawyer, whether you go to a police, the standard answer is, जब law ही सिर्फ औरतों के लिए बना हुआ है, तो हम आदमियों के लिए कुछ नहीं कर सकते. I am not too sure if I would want to live in a society where we can we can completely close our eyes to harassment, torture, and victimization of one gender only because, yes, there is no doubt there has been immense torture to the other gender. I think, and I'm not too sure whether we will ever be an equal society, because US is still not an equal society. United Kingdom is still not an equal society. The most developed countries are still not an equal society. These sort of crimes on women and girls happen there also day in, day out. But do they have gender biased laws? No, they do not. If I were to give you statistics, and probably I will bring them later in the argument, if we are going by how crimes by women against men or crime against men in general have risen, I will give you the statistics. I as a person who fights for men, I as a person who counsels men, I as a person who listens to their and their families, extremely painful stories almost on a daily basis. I'm always asking questions, when exactly would be the right time. What ma'am said is not something that is not said by everybody. Even the Supreme Court of India, when it was approached with the gender neutral laws, PIL, it said we are not really in a society where we can have gender neutral laws right now. So my question is only this: when will that be? When will we come to that place as India, as a nation? When will that be? And what do we do until then? For these men who are being victimized, who are falsely accused, their lives are shattered apart. I've made documentaries documenting these absolutely painful stories. If anybody has an answer to them, I am looking for those answers, because people do ask, where are the answers for women who are victims of injustice? And there are a lot of people who are working on that. But if men are victims of injustice, is it not legitimate to ask that we need to do something for them as well?
Right. Before I move on, though, Deepika, I'd like you to elaborate on which laws are you specifically talking about? Which are the laws that you think are problematic as of now? Because there are various laws that can be termed as non-neutral or biased towards one gender or the other. Which laws do you have the most issue with?
So like we were discussing in the beginning, Shweta, there are, of course, different laws which are skewed towards one gender. And there was a compilation I had read some time back, which had included all the maintenance laws, the custody laws. If you bring all of that spectrum together, there are more than, I guess, 35. But to precisely tell you, the biggest ones that get discussed and that I see on a daily basis are 498A, which criminalizes marital cruelty, mental or physical, only for a married woman. Then there is the Protection for Women from Domestic Violence Act. Then there is the 354, the 375, sexual harassment at workplace. All the laws that are considered. In fact, I wanted to say that the initial thing was, what is gender neutrality? Gender neutrality is when we look at a certain crime or a certain behavior, which is wrong behavior, irrespective of who is committing that behavior. We identify the wrong and we remove the gender from it. That is neutrality. So all the gender-based violence laws in India say only women as victims, and men cannot file complaints under that. I've told you the sections particularly, and another which is not really gender biased per se on the statute, but gives a very wrong end to men is the custody and the visitation laws. I think Shoni is an expert on that. He would be able to shed much more light on that.
Absolutely. Shoni, do come in at this point in time. You deal with cases with respect to 498A, family law, custody. In your assessment of your own legal career and of what is happening at the moment in the country, how far do you think are the men victim of laws that are not gender neutral at this point?
So I like to take a step back and just one clarification that when you say that I deal with such cases, in fact, I am not an advocate. I just do legal consultancy work only, and I don't go and fight their cases in courts. So I do deal with these kind of cases, but not in court. So that is a statement which I wanted to give, because people confuse. People don't understand that a person who does consultancy can actually not be an advocate. So that part, I just want to take a step back. And as Ms. Daruwala and Vageshri ma'am and both said, are men and women equal? No, they are not. So that part, everybody accept that men and women are not equal. And whether they are complementary, whether they are not complementary, that is something which is more philosophical in nature. But when we say that men are not equal, but will they be treated equally in the eyes of law? No, certainly not. There will be certain laws which will be favoring a particular gender. In this case, women. The question is, how far can they go? Vageshri ma'am was listing out all the headlines from the newspapers, and I was listening to it and I was smiling, because These are the items which are repeated often. Some off the cuff remark by someone, some stereotypical thing, and it gets quoted. And all the men are labeled that they think like that. This is what is called stereotyping. This is what stereotyping is. Not all men think like that. In fact, when you talk about sexual offenses, when we compare with the West, US, UK, India has very less incidence of rape or molestation or any other sexual crimes. The reason could again be that what Vageshri ji was saying, that women are protected, they are not allowed to go out at odd times. This could be one of the reasons, and I don't want women to be suppressed to that much extent that they should not be allowed to move out. Of course, never. I'll never like it to be done like that. And the other thing, that rapes or sexual crimes are underreported, I don't buy that argument either, because even in US and UK, they say the same thing, that these cases are very much underreported. There are laws related to sexual offenses. There are laws related to economic violence, physical abuse, even emotional abuse. They're all gender, they're tilted towards a specific gender. I do not know whether the time is right. These laws can be made gender neutral, but there can be certain protection which can be granted to males against false persecution. And there could be a specific law, you know, even if there are, say, 5 men in whole country, even if there are 5 men in whole country who have been sexually harassed at work, should there be any protection for them or not? Even if there is a single man in this country who is raped by a woman, should there be a protection for him or not? Even if there is one man who has committed suicide because of cruelty meted out to him by his wife and in-laws, should those in-laws and wife be punished or not? That is the moot point where I wish to state that I don't say that, or my cause is not that all the laws should be equal for men and women. My cause is that men and women should be treated equally in the eyes of law.
All right.
This is what I want to state as my opinion.
Sure. Let me bring in Dr. Deswal at this point in time. Dr. Deswal, for the understanding of a layman, when you say that a husband, when he's meted with violence at home, there is no cure offered by the law, is that correct? Someone who dies because of violence at the hands of their family member, their wife, their girlfriend, is there no cure offered by the law? Is that correct? So where do we stand legally on this, you know, as far as the law is concerned, with regards to men who are meted with violence, who are killed, who are perhaps tortured at the hands of their wives, their girlfriends, their partners?
Shweta, if I may, I'm so sorry I'm interrupting you, but if I may request you to add on to that question, because this is what happens. A man committing suicide is the extreme. He does so after immense amount of harassment. What if a man is being beaten up and not really, you know, beaten up to the extent that he's bleeding, so that his beatings are very visible? What if a man is being beaten up, emotionally abused, verbally abused every day? His parents called names. There are things thrown at him, the kind of violence that we understand, that violence that women also go through within their domestic relationships. So if there's a domestic violence against a man, what are the recourses for him?
Okay, so the recourse for the actual physical violence and the non-physical violence, which is mental torture in this case.
See, Shweta, marriage does not give a license to kill, neither to the husband nor to the wife. Marriage doesn't give anyone a permission to abuse the other partner. See, the thing is that although the institution of marriage has undergone great changes in the last 2 decades, but as per the traditional system, what happens in our society, that we always look for a groom who is taller, stronger, elder, more educated, well settled, earns more, has a good family background, and then what do? We send our daughter to stay with him in his home with his family. The differences are inevitable when two people stay together. But in this kind of traditional setting, usually it is the girl who finds herself in a vulnerable spot. See, whenever any kind of an abuse or violence, when it takes place within a family, it is very difficult to prove all this in courts of law because that asks for evidences and witnesses. People don't testify against their own family members. Neighbors are reluctant to intervene in others' affairs. So, what do? See, we all know that what Shoni said, what Deepika is saying, I don't deny that yes, men are also subjected to all sorts of physical, mental, financial, emotional abuse. Yes, but the numbers are comparatively less as compared to the violence that takes place against women. See, majority of the women, they are suffering violence within their family. So how do we shield our women? That was the greater concern. See, our constitution guarantees them protection, equality. So what we did, we invoked Article 15(3) to enact a special law for them. Okay. Earlier also, we had laws to punish the offenders, but they offered no relief to the victim. Thankfully, in 2005, we got the DV Act, which is the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act, which provides prompt relief to the victim. And it is only about relief. It gives relief to the woman in form of maintenance, residence, restraining orders, custody of children. See, the objective of Domestic Violence Act is to protect women. It is not to punish the men folk. So when we say that this is a gender specific law only for women, see, it is just doing something where the law was lacking. Because of this lopsided kind of a institution that marriage has become, in which women are mostly at the receiving end. But when we talk about men who are being abused in this institution of marriage, we already have gender neutral laws. See, there is a law against criminal assault. There is a law against any kind of a hurt or grievous hurt. And that doesn't say that if a man has been hit by his wife, we are not going to register an FIR. We already have laws. The gender specific laws that we are specifically talking about here are those which have been made for the protection of women, because ideally what would happen, that women, when they would find themselves at the receiving end, it would be very difficult for the woman to even go and register an FIR. Moreover, see, violence has been normalized in our society. कि पति है वो तो मारेगा, है ना, क्योंकि पति तो परमेश्वर है, तो वो मारेगा, उसको गुस्सा आएगा तो. So to this violence which was normalized, so what we have done when we have enacted this DV Act, we've called out that violence, that see, that is not normal. Violence of any kind, whether it is against the woman, whether it is against the husband, it is not normal, and we already have laws to protect our men folk and to protect our women also. But these are certain laws which are in addition to the laws that we already had, which provide an easy and a quick redress to the large number of victims of violence. And that is why, because women will a larger number constitute the majority of victims, and that is why we got this DV Act. I agree that men need more protection, but for that we should not be diluting the existing laws. What we need to do is we need to broaden our safety net.
Okay, let me get in Ms. Daruwala at this point in time. So I think the idea is that when it comes to domestic violence and the Domestic Violence Act, it is to protect women. It's a positive discrimination because traditionally you believe that women have been at the receiving end. My question is therefore, does the law still stand the merit of the time? Do we still need it? Is it serving any purpose? Because if it continues to discriminate against men, then perhaps it's about time that we relook at it. Ms. Daruwala, you are on mute, ma'am.
Sorry, I just keep it off because there's noise here. First of all, I'd like to go back a little bit, but before I do that, I'll answer your question. Does it discriminate against men? No, it doesn't. Dr. Deswal has explained all the underlying reasons why you need a Domestic Violence Act. But a man can go to a police station and say, my wife is hitting me. I have been assaulted. I am being exploited in the family. I am being intimidated. This is criminal intimidation. All of that can be done. Now, you can't say, as Ms. Bardwaj said, that the implementation of a law or how badly it is implemented is sufficient reason to have this, what are we saying? Remove all laws that seemingly protect women because there is no longer any reason to protect women. I mean, no one can deny the huge power imbalance, political power, economic power, social power, cultural prejudice, traditional discrimination, all of that is there. And that is why we have these laws that make a difference to how you can approach the law. I do a fair amount of data work. I'm not very good at it, but I have lots of other people talking about data, but I do believe in data. Now, if you look at rape, is it okay for me to go there, Ms. Kothari?
Absolutely, ma'am.
So if you look at rape, first of all, Mr. Kapoor very sensibly said that underreporting is in all countries, but the level of underreporting here is enormous. And that is not only for rape, it is all kinds of crime. So to compare the way that criminal statistics are collected in UK, US is really not worth it, or in Scandinavia, because our reporting of crime, our data collection, etc., just don't measure up to those standards. And I think we have to accept it. Then studies recently on what is prosecuted as rape is often a large amount of parents going, this is only one example, of parents going to the court and saying, my child has been kidnapped, my child has been raped, she's underage, or she's not even underage, but she has been kidnapped. And then you turn it into a rape case. Actually, it's not even a rape case at all. It is just parental disapproval that the law, the criminal law, is used for that. In terms of false prosecution, of course you can go and file a matter to say that this was a false prosecution and also get compensation, but it's very difficult to do because everything in terms of access to justice is very difficult to do. And that is for both sides. That is why women don't file FIRs, whatever is happening to them. And that is why you can't have this flat playing field, because a level playing field would be unjust. On the issue of suicide, I think that even the courts, and I have got very clear views on this, suicide and abetment to suicide, first of all, should not be on the books. Suicide itself should not be on the books. If we are saying that people have agency to do what they want to do, but it was a policy matter that was brought in and it became the law, and we should be reviewing and thinking about laws. But, you know, abetment to suicide is now subsumed into huge cruelty or exploitation in the household. And that, to my mind, is not even abetment to suicide. Abetment to suicide is when you actually have the mens rea as well as the act that takes on suicide and leads directly to the person self-harming. But here, you can't get the person on any other ground. So you say, oh, she was so cruel to me, or he was so cruel to me that I killed myself. Or you leave a note. I mean, there are notes being left to say some policy level decision in the center caused people in Maharashtra to kill themselves because they are farmers, and they leave a note and it says, but you don't charge that person with abetment to suicide. It has to be a proximate act. And I think that the lower courts especially have really muddied the waters by calling cruelty, which is terrible. It is terrible cruelty, and it should be stopped, and there should be the police taking notice of it. But the culture of this country also makes it a laughable issue for a man to go and say, I have been raped. You won't believe him. You won't put his case forward. That's not the law's fault. That is the way in which our culture ensures that the people who should be protecting us are not prepared to do what is necessary to do to make sure that that wrong is righted.
All right. I think Shoni has a question, and then we also have one question from the audience at this point in time. Yes, Shoni.
So I was listening to Ms. Daruwala, and what essentially she was saying, and she made a very interesting point that whenever there is a case of elopement, the parents will go and file a case of rape against the man. So it was essentially not rape. And this kind of arguments I hear on a daily basis. They say that women have filed a case that they don't even know what is written in the FIR, what is written in the complaint. So what we are doing, please listen to me carefully, Ms. Daruwala. What we have essentially done is that we have created laws in which women have become pawns, that they become complainant, and somebody else is seeking revenge using those laws against someone else. Is that right? Was the law meant for that? Should there be a law like that, that if I have a female at my home, she can be used as a pawn to seek revenge against someone else? Because women, as she pointed out, women don't read what is written in the complaint most of the time. Right? Now, when they say there is a culture, when they say that if a man is raped and he goes and complains, people will laugh at him. It is a cultural problem. Same case is not a cultural problem when it comes to enacting laws for females. Why? Stereotypes are still there. It still should be a cultural problem. There shouldn't be a law for women also in this. If I go by the same argument, there shouldn't be a law for women also, no? Because it is a cultural problem. If it is going to be a cultural problem, there shouldn't be a law against it. Then I say, if it is not a cultural problem and law is meant to resolve any cultural problem, there should be a law to protect men also, even if the incident rate is very low. With these laws, what has happened? You take any FIR from Kashmir to Kanyakumari of 498A, the contents would be same. I got married on such and such date. Few days, everything was normal. So much dowry was demanded. My father, with great difficulty, fulfilled the dowry promise. Then I was made to suffer because the dowry was less. Everyone wants a Maruti or a Civic or a Honda or a Mercedes in this country. So now, in the same way, these laws, how these laws are misused, I'll give you an example. In UK, if a man beats his wife, वो गधा है, बेफालतू में मारता है. In India, if he beats his wife, वो डौरी के लिए मारता है, बड़ा समझदार है. There is a purpose behind it. What kind of argument is that?
I don't know. You're making it. I don't get it.
No, ma'am,
Honestly.
you said the same thing. In the case of elopement, you said in the case of elopement, parents of the girl go and file a rape case against the man. Did you say or not?
No, but
And-
Shruti,
and-
let me come in, let me also bring in Ms. Daruwala and then Deepika into this conversation. But personally, I mean, from the point of view of someone who's hearing you out, what I'm hearing essentially is that just because a law is misused, there's no need for the law. What guarantees that there is a law for men to follow and that will not be misused?
I'm saying there again, if you are listening to the recourse, then there should be a recourse for false persecution and the law should be made very strong.
But there is.
No, there is.
Ms. Daruwala,
Even if there is
have
a
you
law,
heard
it is a very
women
big law,
being
and you
sent
have already
to,
explained
how many
it.
women have you sent?
Sorry,
How many women
law
have you
existed
seen
for
in your
women
own
also.
life actually
Deepika
getting
come in,
prosecuted?
sorry,
for
let's please speak one after the other.
Yeah.
The
I
law-
think we wouldn't want to get into an argumentative thing, though, even though it's argumentative. I think I just want to respond. During the lockdown, I was approached by a man who had his head opened up by his wife, who had beaten him up with a balan. He had his blood coming out, and his friend sent me his picture. You know, he is taken up entrepreneurship. Just before the COVID thing happened, the wife is not happy with his earnings. The wife is creating ruckus because of financial things every single day. He's taking care of every responsibility of kids, of hers, of everything, but she's not happy. And she's thinking maybe their life is ruined or whatever. And she's venting it out in form of domestic violence. I said, okay, Faridabad ka case tha. I tagged Faridabad police. After creating so much of ruckus, he was even entertained at the police station. Then, since everybody here said there are gender neutral laws for assault 323, 324, there is no provision which is gender neutral for mental torture. This man went and we wanted to get an FIR registered against her under 323. No, the cops did not do that. The cops filed a panchnama of 171-55, and they actually held the husband over there, then asked the wife to come to the police station. She said, nothing doing, I'm not going to come to the police station. They didn't do anything. I have documented cases where the man was beaten up black and blue by the wife, her brothers and everybody. When he went to the police station, the FIR was actually registered against him, Shweta. And these are ground realities. Now, I will tell you, forget about these ground cases that I handle. The Delhi Commission for Women has gone on record saying that 25% of their calls are now coming from men, and they do not know how to handle them, because these men call and say that our wives are harassing us, our wives are abusing us. Where is our helpline? Where can we report? If it was so easy for a man to go and complain under the existing laws of domestic violence, then these men would not be calling up the women helpline. Another example I would give you. I myself, a friend of mine who was heavily abused and tortured, called up this women helpline and he said, "Ma'am, mere ko kahan pe nyay mil sakta hai?" And this female police officer herself, I put that recording out also. She said, "Ma'am, sir, hame bahut bura lagta hai, lekin aap aadmiyon ke liye kuch nahi hai." This is what a officer who is handling daily calls by people who call them in helplessness is saying, right? Now, this is one side. Another side, when we are talking about rape laws, just last night at 2 a.m., this girl messages me. She says, "Ma'am, my brother is suicidal." I said, "Why?" She said he was in relationship with this woman for 4 years. She's a lawyer. She abuses the entire family. She's put so many restrictions on my brother, even before they are, married or in some kind of a committed relationship. Now she's saying he doesn't want to get married to her. Now she is saying, if you do not marry me, I'm suing you for rape. And there are so many cases like that which are coming, Shweta. See, anybody who I have met in the men's rights space, it is absolutely a disaster that anybody would say that we want to take the rights away from women. No, we want, in fact, the rights given to women to be implemented in the way that they have been enacted for. There are still women who do not want to go to the police station because they fear. There's still, uneducated women who are treated very badly in the police stations. But at the same time, we have the rape on false promise of marriage cases going from a 21% of the reported cases in 2015 to 51% in 2019. Is that what the rape laws were for? I have made a documentary on it where a sitting Inspector General of Police, who's a female police officer, is saying there are women who come to me and say, "Ma'am, ye mere se shaadi nahi kara, meri se shaadi kara do, aur agar shaadi na kare, to iske upar rape ka case laga do." She's like, are we pandits here trying to get men and women married? And what we are saying is that there is absolutely every inch of measure required to give protection to women. There is every inch of measure required to give rights to women. We still do not see girls, growing up in the way they should be brought up, their education-wise, their health-wise. We have so many issues to tackle. But the legislations which we have brought for their betterment, what is happening to them? Can we review them? How impactful are they? When we're talking about Domestic Violence Act not being against men, I'm sorry, there are absolutely educated women drawing interim maintenance today to the tunes of 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, and it goes on and on and on and on without even proving of the crime. I have friends who are giving 50K, 60K, 70K to women who have worked some time, who dropped out of their job because of their own choice, because they wanted to, have a good time after the marriage for 1 year or 2 years. They made a choice, but then obviously at the end, when things go sour, the allegation is कि इसने मुझसे job छुड़वाई है. There was a recent order by the J&K High Court, and one of the rare orders where the court has fined the woman, the wife, 10 lakhs rupees because she has thrown the husband out of the house. The man is not living in his own house when he is in his right ages. She misused the orders of the Domestic Violence Act itself to throw the man out. And she has been litigating, going from lower court to the higher court, to the Supreme Court, getting a transfer petition. Then when things did not go her way, she said, okay, now I will withdraw the petition. There have been cases where courts have said, the Delhi High Court said the woman filed a false gang rape case. We are not going to prosecute her because it's going to impact her married life. We had a judge in the Rohtak court make a woman stand only for 7 hours for filing a false gang rape case where the men spent 2.5 years in jail. Ma'am, I have so many of these instances. They are absolutely bizarre. But the problem is that the instances that you said, the wrongs that happen to women, come in large headlines in newspaper, whereas the things that I'm talking about are shelved into the corner. And when a Renuka Chaudhary laughs and says it's time for men to be harassed, a sitting Women and Child Development Minister, it's on record, ma'am. It's in her interview with Karan Thapar. She said, if that Domestic Violence Act is biased, then probably it's time for men to suffer.
Okay.
I'm sure it's the kind of
on that. Yes.
About lie back and enjoy it. It's just the kind of foolish, insensitive remark that is made about people who are actually going through experiences of deep suffering. All that you have said is entirely legitimate. However, if we keep the discussion about one incident and another incident and what some judge said, etc., I could go back, and I'm sure that Dr. Deswal, who practices, could go back even further and then tell us 1,000 incidences of the same kind. And it doesn't sort of take us anywhere. If you're talking about promise of marriage, this was an extremely Victorian law, and that should definitely be off the books as far as I'm concerned. It should definitely be off the books, just like the adultery law was off the books. It got off the books. There is every reason to review the making of law and what the law says. I have deep conviction about how laws should be made and the process by which they should be made and the deep consultation that should go on. And that once white papers are produced and things are tabled before Parliament, the whole country should know what the debate is about before you table another law. Because one of the things that I don't want to happen is for the state to take more and more power away from ourselves as individuals. The idea of laws is to give agency. Now, the agency, as Dr. Kapoor said, the agency can be abused and it will be abused, while the actual implementation of law, the capacity to deliver justice, the capacity to approach the court, access to justice, is such a difficult proposition. That is really what the problem is. You're talking about what the police officers said. Ki madam, कानून कुछ भी नहीं करती मर्दों के लिए. That's not true. But the man doesn't know the law enough to tell you that. And you're stuck with it. It's just not true. No one can assault you. No one can exploit you. No one can take away your property. But you are facing up against a broken system. And we are all contending with that. You can make another 20 laws for women and it will be abused in the same way. If you don't straighten the platform on which all this is supposed to take place. Okay. You will have one good judge who will throw out a case where there is obvious abuse of power. But just see the amount of cases. We could go on the whole evening about it, where a matter has come to the court, a matter has been reported, there's halagulla in the media, and some recompense is made to the parties, but nobody then does anything about the police, the prosecutor, the doctor, all of whom in cahoots have brought us to this pass. Because it's exhausting, because the court is overwhelmed, there are too few judges, prosecutors are too few, doctors are worried about other things than actually providing the kind of support they should. All of this is a heap of stuff which Dr. Deswal will no doubt talk about, which is entirely injustice. So it's really, I wonder when we are talking like this, whether we're talking about the right things. Gender neutrality, more protection for women. Is there enough protection for men? There is not enough protection for Maya Daruwala. If she were to get into big trouble with Dr. Kapoor or with you, Ms. Bharadwaj. Okay. I just don't know how we would do it. We would probably chup chap say, okay, don't register the case, Baba, enough.
Okay. So I guess it all boils down to implementation of law rather than the law per se is my takeaway from what Ms. Daruwala just said. Dr. Deswal, I do have a question also from the listeners, from the viewers at this point in time, and a question from A. Anand here, who says number of prosecutions of LGBT intercourse under Section 377 IPC was virtually zero, but we rightly believe that it must be struck down. Are straight men subhuman to not deserve protection from domestic violence?
Just repeat the question again, Shweta?
Absolutely, ma'am. So Anand says number of prosecution of LGBT intercourse under Section 377 was virtually zero, but we believe that it must be struck down, and it was eventually struck down. Are straight men subhuman to not deserve protection from domestic violence? So essentially, are men subhuman? Don't they deserve protection from domestic violence? If they do, what is the recourse? What's the recourse that they have at this point in time, and how must, because from my understanding of the conversation that's been going on for a while is that there is protection for men, not under the Domestic Violence Act, but under different laws, but they are not aware. As a matter of fact, even the police is not aware, and they
no, Shweta, no, I have to correct you.
If you may, let me complete just 1 second, and then you can come in, and then perhaps Dr. Deswal, and then you can come in. The idea is that if they're not aware, or in cases that they are aware, the police is not aware. So the fact that there is no problem with the law is what many experts on the law believe. Deepika here disagrees. She says that there is a fundamental problem with the law per se. But my understanding of it is that there is absolutely zero understanding with the victims, especially male victims, when it comes to legal recourse, when it comes to recourse in front of the police. And the police, effectively, it just relinquishes any responsibility when it comes to male, victims of male domestic violence.
Regarding Anand's question, there are two things that I want to say. First thing is that 377 has not been struck down. See, 377 has just been diluted. It has been just watered down, and it is only non-consensual activities which are now punishable. Consensual activities have been taken out of the ambit of 377. Then the next thing, he's talking about the abuse of laws. Okay. 1 minute, I just want to clarify that we already have ample safeguards in place. See, the problem is not with the laws. The problem is with awareness regarding the laws and also the proper implementation of those provisions. See, how many of us know that Indian law does recognize sexual harassment of men as a criminal offense? We have section 354A IPC, which is gender neutral to the extent that the victim herein can be any person. The only thing is that the perpetrator can only be a man. See, thus the only hiccup here is that our law does not acknowledge the sexual harassment of a man.
Ma'am, under 354, it is a victim who has to be a woman, and the perpetrator can be man or woman. 354 cannot be filed by a man, ma'am. Shoni, am I wrong?
No, I would like to clarify that the perpetrator can be only a man. The victim can be a man as well as a woman, and there is one specific provision which talks about if you show pornography to a woman against her will. So what this means is that if you show pornography to a man even against his will, then it is okay. But otherwise, see, under 354, a man can be held guilty of sexually harassing another man.
Ma'am, the law itself says assault or criminal force to woman with intent to outrage her modesty. Ma'am,
She's talking about 354A, not 354.
Acha. Okay.
Deepika, in fact, I've been very actively following up this criminal law amendments, and especially this 2013 amendment. So I know it very clearly that what it is actually saying, and that is why. See, I totally agree with what you are saying, that yes, men, they are at the receiving end many times, but that is not because we don't have laws to protect them. The problem is that we don't know what the laws are. And second thing, the police, the way the police deals with those laws, the way they do these indiscriminate arrests and all. See, the thing is, our law, the problem here is only that the law does not acknowledge sexual harassment of man at the hands of a woman. Then another issue that is more precarious than sexual harassment of men is the leveling of false accusations against them. See, we have the POSH law, which provides protection to men against false allegations. See, under section 14 of this POSH law, if a woman levels malicious allegations and furnishes false evidence by producing any forged or misleading document, then the woman can be made punishable. So you see, we can protect men against false complaints.
Ma'am, if I'm not wrong, it's a 500 rupees fine.
No. It is the maximum punishment is same as manhood.
Yes, you see, the same kind of punishments that can be given to a man, the similar kind of punishments, they can be given to the women also. Okay, then see, the main problem is that our police conducts arrests at the drop of a hat, which is totally uncalled for. See, it is important for all of us to know that in all cognizable offenses, arrest is not mandatory. Arrest is to be made only when it is necessary to prevent that person from committing further offense, or when we need to have that person for a proper investigation, or to prevent such person from influencing the witnesses or tampering with evidence, or when it is otherwise not possible to ensure the presence of such person in the court. Thus, you see, there is an ample discretion with the police officers, and the police officers are expected to exercise this discretion in a fair and reasonable manner. Every FIR does not necessarily have to translate into arrest of the person named therein. See, our courts have time and again emphasized upon the significance of due process to ensure justice. We have presumption of innocence, which is one of the cardinal principles of criminal law. See, the problem here and the concern is regarding the irreparable damage to reputation that is caused in such cases. Why? Because the law protects the name of victim from disclosure, but no protection is extended to the accused who might be innocent. But we have to know that we have a law. That is, one who is falsely accused may initiate prosecution for defamation. In India, prosecution is also a criminal offense. So under 499, you can initiate prosecution for that. So you see, testimony of the prosecutrix is not the gospel truth on which we can blindly rely. See, again, we have section 193 of the IPC, under which if anybody gives or fabricates false evidence, that is a punishable crime. Then section 211 of the IPC, it enables one who is falsely implicated to initiate action for malicious prosecution. Thus, you see, leveling false charges against any person, knowing that there is no just or lawful ground for such proceeding or charge, that is punishable with imprisonment up to 2 years. See, again, one big problem is what people complain is that, see, we are not granted bail. That is again something which people say. But law prohibits the release on bail in cases where there are reasonable grounds for believing that the accused is guilty of an offense, which is punishable with either death or life imprisonment. See, none of the sections that are allegedly invoked to harass men, such as we talk about 498A, sexual harassment, molestation, or eve-teasing, or all these sections, see, none of these sections, they entail punishment of more than 3 years. Allegations of rape under 376 are an exception where bail can be denied, but that too only if there exist reasonable grounds that point towards the guilt of the accused. So you see, we have ample protection for men. The only thing is, we don't know what the laws are. And maybe to that end, maybe we can also say that the police does not implement those laws properly. But to say that we don't have gender neutral laws, or we don't have laws that can protect men, that is something where I strongly disagree.
Okay. Shoni, yes, please.
Yes, Dr. Vageshwari taught me well, so I now want to tell her something, that whatever section she has said, 193, 182, 211, a man cannot go and file it as a matter of right. For 193, the permission of the court is required. There is a procedure under 340, which has to be followed. It is at the discretion of the court whether the process will begin to prosecute the woman or not. In 182, it is the discretion of the police officer whether the process will begin at all or not. Under 211, it is the discretion of the magistrate whether the process will begin at or not. And they very well withhold their pleasure to begin this process against any woman. And when you're talking about defamation, whatever has been said in court is not considered as defamation. Defamation is what happens in the public eye. Only if those allegations are broadcasted in public, only then there is a case of defamation made out. So whatever you are saying that men are not aware of all these provisions do make a very good WhatsApp message in our groups all the time. But please bear with me when I say that it is high-nigh impossible to prosecute a complainant under all these sections which you have listed. It is not possible. It is impossible, next to nearly impossible, to prosecute a complainant under these sections. Now, I like to tell you something more, and Shweta, it is for the information of all the panelists and all the public which are listening to this broadcast. what has happened to all the gender laws or laws which are made to protect a particular gender? What has happened to those? Has these laws given property rights to females? No. Has these laws given any kind of protection from to a woman from violence? What happens from her parental family? No. NHFS survey, if you National Family Health Survey, if you read, it states very clearly that a woman is likely to face violence 6 times higher from her own parental family than her in-laws family. Who was to give them property rights, whether it was for the in-laws or her parents? So all the laws which are made to protect a woman protects her from her in-laws and not mainly from the parental family. Of course, there is an exception, protection of women from Domestic Violence Act, but hardly you will see any prosecution of her own family members. Hardly any. And even if there is, it is on the behest of the husband or some other person to get the property. So all these laws, yes, implementation is bad, but who will make sure that the implementation of the laws, whichever are created for women or protection of a particular section of society, be implemented? You talk about POSH. There is a punishment for false prosecution in POSH Act. Yes, there is. So similar kind of provision should be inbuilt into all legislations. There is a provision of false prosecution in SC/ST Act. You know, that somehow curbs to some extent the misuse. It is not to say that SC/ST Act is not misused. It is also grossly misused. But still there is a provision enacted within the law that if a false case is filed under this act, the complainant can face, action similar to the POSH Act. We have made rape laws very stringent, but what has happened with that? Has the number of rape registered gone up? Yes, they have gone up. You would say that it is good implementation. More and more women are coming to, report. But despite all the changes which has been made in CRPC as well as IPC, what has happened to the conviction in rape cases? They have dwindled. So essentially what we have done, we have created a monster which harasses men. Rape cases or dowry cases or domestic violence cases, they have become tools of extortion only. Nothing beyond it. Not even a single case of punishment in 498A 406 case from Supreme Court of India. In 2019, whatever punishments you see in whatever convictions you see in 498A cases are those cases in which 498 is added with 304B. Not even a single case I have seen where the punishment has been upheld by High Court or Supreme Court of India in 498A, plain vanilla 498A 406 case. Not even a single.
Just 1 minute. The
Yes.
low rate of conviction in 498A is because of the high rate of attrition. Because we know that there
ma'am,
court settlements.
it is not low, it is zero. It is not low, it is zero. Please do not say low. It is zero.
Exactly, Dr. Deswal. Was the law enacted to punish people who perpetrate violence, or it was an arbitration tool to get as much money in alimony as you want? What was the law for? Then tomorrow we will say that, matrimonial cruelty has not been taken care of by 498A because the law doesn't work, and we probably would ask for another law.
Ma'am, what has
How would
happened
that serve anyone's
498 is
purpose?
now happening with rape. What happened with 498 is now happening with rape cases. They have also become tools of extortion. They have become tools of settlement. What are we doing, ma'am?
I just want to make one very quick point here. Sorry, Shoni, to interrupt you, Shweta. Since a lot of people misunderstand people asking for rights of men and asking for some protection, and some treat men as human beings, basic thing. can the legislation not do a small thing that men who are harassed and tortured, can they make their complaints? Can the ministry have one cell where all these men who are going through extreme form of injustices make a complaint to them? Because nowhere else is this data being aggregated, or it is being understood or tried to be empathized with, that men are having problems. So right now we are in a blind space. We do not have any, we can say these are provisions, men do not know about provisions. Even after Arnesh Kumar judgment, where the Supreme Court passed guidelines to avoid arbitrary arrest, last year there were 1,49,000 arrests under 498A, about 30,000 women who got arrested. The people find loopholes, lawyers come up with loopholes. They are now adding unnatural sex allegations with every 498A, and the woman is not required to even give a medical evidence of it. People are spending 3 months, 4 months in jail, which did not happen earlier, but now that is happening because a 377 is added. So if people are thinking that they can put the man at a very lower end of the stake and get away with it, it's been years and years that we have been talking about this. When can somebody listen to these people? And the unrest is growing, and this conversation is growing because the numbers are increasing, and nobody gives a damn to this. There are discussions. Thankfully, there are discussions right now. But then, when can we actually see a result? And that's why a lot of people say a commission for men will not solve problem. Okay, we don't know what will solve problem, but there is a problem. Can we please recognize that?
All right, let me get in Dr. Deswal on that, and perhaps then we can shift gear because we are in the last 20 minutes of this debate. Dr. Deswal, a fair question there from Deepika. Can we at least recognize that there is a problem? We don't know what's going to solve it, whether it's a commission, whether it's going to be by the way of separate laws. Whatever can solve the problem should solve the problem, but at least should there be a recognition now that there is a problem here?
See, Shweta, a problem is there. I can't deny that there is no problem. Okay, and then again, making a men's commission won't be any solution, because we've had a commission for women since long, and still there are problems that women are facing. See, many women-centric legislations, they were enacted in haste, while acceding to public demands in the wake of large-scale protests or movements. Now, their implementation, when it comes to the implementation, there was so much of confusion and chaos as to their use, misuse, and the proportionate balance was not checked before they came into practice. Okay. We cannot afford to be impervious to the misuse of the law, because that goes against the very ideology of equality to all. We must support equality and equal protection of laws to all as declared under Article 40. See, when we talk about false accusations, they are actually an impediment to women's movement, and that must be discouraged. Abuse of the law, whether it is against man or against a woman, it has to be safeguarded against. See, charges, if there are false charges, they will not stand the scrutiny of trial eventually. But we know that conclusion of fair trial, it takes a long time. And in the meantime, the accused suffers immense humiliation. See what happens in the meantime. Police, they conduct arrests indiscriminately. Courts, they deny bail as a routine. No, this is all a violation of the accused's basic rights. See, we protect a woman's name from disclosure in sexual offences, but we do not afford any such protection to the accused, who is named and shamed publicly. See, the media puts a man on a public trial. His pictures are released, details of the alleged incident and all are made public. This causes untold embarrassment and suffering to the accused and his family members, who are then shunned, they are ostracized by society. So yes, crime has no gender, I agree. And I also agree that we need gender neutral laws, and eventually we hope to see gender neutral laws one day. But for now, we don't have a substantive equality. So I still maintain my ground that we cannot have gender neutrality in laws at the moment.
All right. I want to shift the focus at this point in time to one of the important underlying factors that we've been discussing all this while, and that is the silence of not just men, but also women. And the reason why we needed women-centric laws in the first place, because as a society, as a culture, we shame people to remain silent. Women for a very long time, culturally and historically, have been shamed into silence. Today, men are being shamed into silence. So the conversation, therefore, the larger conversation should be about the culture that is an impediment to justice, which is the culture of silence in this case scenario. What does it say about a society, Ms. Daruwala? Where do we stand as far as the silence is concerned? Because that to me is the major impediment. Regardless of what laws you bring in, it's not going to help anybody. You're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know where to begin on the silence business, because sometimes the power relationship between relationships between men and women, between rich and poor, between caste, between ruler and ruled, is so great that silence is the only option to survival. Like Mr. Kapoor and Ms. Bhardwaj, I really admire them because they're taking up something that is almost counterintuitive. You know, it's against the flow of what is being said, etc. But they are pointing to the abuse of law and the abuse that the system permits whoever has the power. For 5 minutes, the woman may have power. For 20 minutes, the man may have power. All these people who are abusing, they're not exclusively women by any chance. The parents, there's the father who is saying, my daughter got kidnapped, hi. When in fact, she's not being kidnapped. And you know, in every case, who for instance is allowing all this to happen? A very macho police, only 10% women in the police. Across the nation, 11% max. Some states have more, some states have less. The judges on the bench, by the time you get to the High Court, the numbers are in single digits. So even the system that we are going to access justice is steeped in male dominance at the moment, struggling to change that. So who do you speak to? But just to take the question about silence, I think that we must not also create this argument or put this argument on the foundation of men and women. I think we make a mistake in that and allow those who are in power then to do what is injustice to both, because we are in opposition to each other somehow. Rather, the whole situation, the problem must be the problem of injustice to anyone. We are talking about men and women today. What about the transgender? What happens? Is he anywhere in the conversation? We just love to make fun. We love to hold them out as freaks. And when we give them a concession, it's because we are so progressive and so noble. It's really not that. What we need to look at is access to justice, training, retraining, accountability of state actors who are there only not to govern, but the trust is there that you will give us good governance, good systems. All of that is not being looked at, and until that is looked at, we can keep on shifting ground and making this law excess, that law. You know, I think we should review our laws, definitely. but we should not review them so that they become somebody's agenda. The only agenda is justice under the Constitution in our very diverse country, where you have to recognize that power is not equally shared.
Something very interesting you brought up, Ms. Daruwala, and that is with regards to what happens to the right of the LGBTQ community. And a lot of them watching us at this point in time, maybe looking up to us asking, you make it about men and women, but what about us? Where is the legal recourse for us? Where is the legal recourse if I'm a gay man, if I'm a lesbian woman, if I'm raped by the same sex, if I'm a transgender because I fall into neither of the category? What do we say to those people who are watching us who are still not sure whether there is a legal recourse, Dr. Deswal?
That's a very good question, and I was hoping that you would touch on that. See, we have Section 377, which penalizes non-consensual carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal. See, this talks about any man, woman, or animal. It is time to reinterpret this law. See, this explanation, what the explanation to this section says, penetration is sufficient to constitute the carnal intercourse which is necessary to the offense described in this section. So thus it is commonly interpreted to mean that it can be committed only by a man because it is considered that only a man is capable of penetrating. See, we need to challenge the old interpretation in view of the changes that were brought about in the definition of rape in 2020. Earlier, we had only penovaginal penetration that would constitute rape, but now all sorts of penetrative violations of the female's anatomy, whether it is by fingers, sticks, or objects, now that also constitutes rape. So if the courts interpret 377 in the light of amended 375, then it would be possible to prosecute all persons, including men, women, for sexual assault, whether it is done against a man, against a woman, against trans people. See, because trans man or a trans woman, they would also be considered in the category of a man or a woman. So we already have the law, but we need to reinterpret it in the light of the developments in the law. And then I feel that we could cover all that in this law.
I would,
Yes,
I would want to, I appreciate what ma'am has said, but I think justice or safety or, being safe doesn't limit ourselves to only one section. I think if a transgender is being humiliated and violated inside home, not sexually, but in form of a domestic relationship, they should have recourse. And above everything else, I think they deserve the respect that any human being deserves. And I think there's a long way to go for us to come to that respect. But I think laws are a great instrument of change, and they should look at all the provisions and bringing in transgenders also. There are gay marriages happening now, even though not recognized by the law. So what if something happens? Where do they go? I think these are changes. The way society changes, we will have to look into these changes. But I want to come back to your question that you asked, Shweta, the issue of silence. I feel sorry to say that in zest of empowering women to speak up and not remain in silence anymore, we have created now sort of a culture where they somehow think that even if they're not legitimately raising a voice or unjustly raising a voice to trap somebody, to abuse somebody, they will let go of. And they are doing that more and more, which is very wrong according to me. I would like to present an example for that. And this is an example that happened in front of the eyes of this entire nation. Priyadarshini beat up this cab driver not once, not twice, 23 slaps, right? We have not seen that woman behind bars even once. All of us here can imagine what would have happened if a man had done something like that in the public space, right? We have all seen how a Zomato guy, I'm giving you anecdotal cases and I completely understand that I'm giving you anecdotal instances, My problem is that these are only very specific cases where the world saw that, okay, there's a guy also who's being on the wrong side. And that's why I bring up these cases, not for any other reason. We saw that this woman clearly and very candidly lied about a broken nose. Did anything happen to her? No. That guy was immediately suspended from Zomato despite being the victim. And that is why the culture of silence is seeping deep into men, because they know that if they speak up, rather than getting justice, they actually could be slapped left, right, and center for speaking up and having a case registered against them only. Because this has happened so many times where if a man was being abused by a woman, if he spoke up, then the police registered a case against that only. And that, I think, is very wrong. If we are asking our women to speak up in cases of injustice, we should ask our men also to speak up. But unfortunately, I'll tell you the ground reality. Even me as a men's right activist tell a lot of times to men, if they have been slapped by a woman, if they have been abused by a woman, I would tell them, case nahi hua na, usne tumhare upar case nahi kiya na. Just day before yesterday, there's a guy who had written to me that a woman humiliated him, abused him in entire workplace for no fault of his, just because she got so angry at him. And she said, I will file a case on you. And he said, ma'am, I'm feeling so tortured for the last 2 days. It doesn't go out of my mind. I'm feeling very unsafe to go to the office. What do I do? I said, sir, please don't do anything, because she has not done anything against you. If you do something, then she will file a molestation case on you. In Mumbai, I handled a case few days ago, and I'm speaking so passionately, Shweta, because I deal with these things day in, day out, and I see the bias day in, day out. There were these very two poor salespeople who were slapped left, right, center on CCTV footage by these very rich elite women in a prominent market in Mumbai. What did the cops do? Registered an FIR of molestation against these boys. So I think men are being silenced, not just because of society, because society sees them as weak. If they speak up, kaisa aadmi hai, apni बीवी से पिट गया, you know, वो पिटा तो भी उसको blame करेंगे, और अगर उसने पीटा तो भी उसको blame करेंगे, उसके पास recourse नहीं है. But there is an additional thing that if they speak up, they may actually come into criminal, you know, structure where they are not at mistake, but then they will be tried for years and years. And ma'am, I beg to a little disagree with you. Yes, we have a male-dominated structure. Yes, we have male-dominated structure at police stations, in the judiciary also. But let me give you a very small example. There is a girl who has filed 7 rape cases on 7 different men at 7 police stations in Gurgaon, only Gurgaon, within 1 year. There are 2 182 cases on her. She has not yet been put behind bars, even for a single day. And this girl, all of 21 years old, has the audacity to go and tell the judge that if you grant bail to this guy, I'm going to complain against you in the High Court. Police officers are afraid to take the right step. They are like, अगर हमने लड़के के सारी family members को हटा दिया FIR में से, तो हमारी ऊपर से inquiry बैठ जाएगी if the woman complains. So this is reality, that if somebody even want to do the right thing, we have had a case in Gurgaon where an IPS officer was transferred because she took a stand that she's not going to let family members of a man be falsely implicated in a rape case. Miss Bharti Arora, I think that case was out in the public eye. So this is what we are talking about. People are being disadvantaged. People are being penalized for doing the right thing. And that is very wrong.
Okay.
Here, what we are talking about is abuse and misuse of the laws.
No, ma'am, that is fine. नहीं, लेकिन मैम अगर कोई चाहता भी है ना सिस्टम में कि सही चीज करे, कोई जज चाहता है कि सही जजमेंट दे, या कोई पुलिस ऑफिसर चाहता है कि whatever is in their मतलब ma'am, right now Odisha में there's a girl who has got 100 women inside the house of her husband who has already filed for divorce. Police is not doing anything, ma'am, because they're scared. I have met members of parliament, ma'am, they say feminists are going to eat us up alive if we say anything on this. This is what our members of parliament are saying, ma'am. This is not about abuse of laws. This is about,
now
about people being scared.
Okay,
I
I
was
think
only talking about the abuse of law, but I'll come to this term feminist. When people say feminists are going to eat us alive, it is something like being a feminist is not an F word.
Okay,
Why
can I
do
take
people
can I
yes,
take 1 minute?
please one speak one after the other. Shoni, I'll bring you in. Let Dr. Deswal just complete, and then I'll bring you in, and we'll wind up the debate because we're already way over the time. But I think it's an interesting
Just
question.
one thing, because I need to clarify this thing about feminists. People call feminists as feminazis. I pity those people who lack the brains to compare people who believe in equality of sexes with a race that perpetrated Holocaust. In fact, each one of us should be a feminist, because to my mind, one who is not a feminist is a sexist. See, why feminist? Why not a humanist? Such a preposterous argument. Now, this is equivalent to saying, why mankind, why not humankind? I mean, what difference does that make anyway? We need to understand and appreciate the essence. See, when feminism started, trans people had no visibility. Only women were struggling to be accepted as human beings. I mean, before this, they were like children of some lesser god. So women, they were struggling to get their basic rights. Right to vote, right to work, right to earn, right to live with dignity. See, feminism talks about equality of all humans. In fact, beyond humans, they also talk about acceptance of all living beings like animals, birds, respect for nature. So it is time that we stopped talking about feminists in a derogatory manner.
I apologize, ma'am. I just very quickly, Shweta. Ma'am, I really invite you to watch this documentary called The Red Pill by a feminist called Cassie J. Her last parting words in the documentary is, after this experience, I no longer call myself a feminist. Ma'am, the true essence of feminism somewhere I think has gotten lost. I think I am a feminist because I cannot see injustice on anyone. I cannot see injustice on women. I've taken stands for women. I was the loudest voice, crying horse. What is happening in this Gogoi case? Like, how can structure behave like that, But ma'am, when we see feminists and very prominent feminists saying all men are trash, sometimes saying, why couldn't all men be killed? That sort of tells us that this is not a quest for justice. This is not now a quest for justice, but this is now a quest for reversing the pendulum. What was wrong earlier, you want to do the wrong now. And that's why a lot of people are getting, disillusion kind of a thing. You can disagree with me.
I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
just that we're very, very short of time. I'll just end this conversation with Shoni here. And I think we'll have to end the debate per se because we're way over 90 minutes. But Shoni, last word to you. We're talking about feminism. It's another debate for another day, but please do come in.
Yeah. So last 60 seconds, I won't take more than that. Ms. Daruwala was saying something about female participation in women in police force and judiciary. So I had an interesting conversation with one of my Jew friends. I asked him that, is it right in Israel, a black Jew is not equivalent to a white Jew? He said, no, it is not the case. The reason is that their percentage is low. They are represented low because they come from an educated background. So the same is probably the case with female participation in judiciary as well as police force or any other, vocation. But when there is a fund which is stated Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, 79% of it is on media campaign itself. 79% of it is spent on media campaign. So please, if you go correct that, things your female participation woman empowerment will increase. Don't give only words. Please put in effort. Please put in money where it is required. And
I think that's the imperative of the government, Shoni. Thanks very much for that value addition. I will have to end the debate at this point in time. I think we have moved on quite a bit from where we started. We talked about feminism. We talked about female participation. We're ending on why government needs to spend more money on females. So put your money where your mouth is. But thanks very much, all of you who joined in today with your valuable contribution. I think a lot of value addition to what we already know about laws that are gender neutral, laws that are not gender neutral, and where do men can find their recourse in case they're not finding their recourse with the existing legal structure, Domestic Violence Act, etc. Yes, there is a problem. I think everybody in the room acknowledges that there is a problem. Yes, there is a room for improvement. And I think that will come in gradually with voices that we have at this point in time. I think Ms. Daruwala is shaking her head. I'm not sure if she agrees with me on that, whether there's going to be a change in my
I'm
lifetime.
sick of gradualism.
Gradualism.
I just want justice now.
I
think if we want immediate changes, then I think we would be repeating the cycle again of doing something in a knee-jerk way. I think there needs to be deliberation, there needs to be understanding, there needs to be a thorough analysis of what is going wrong where, and then address that.
I would agree on that. I would agree. I'm a proud feminist, by the way, just to mention that towards the end of the conversation. But I don't have to be a men's rights activist to know that men are suffering, right? I don't have to be that. So I think it's a very complex issue, and I appreciate all of you for bringing in some very valid points into the conversation. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks to all the viewers who've been very patient. We have run over our dedicated 90 minutes for now, but thanks very much for tuning in.
Do me a favor, Shweta, please tell all the feminists who call me a woman hater that I'm not a woman hater. I just adore women, I just love women, and I want every woman to be safe, sound, and live the best to her capabilities. So please, if you could do that on my behalf. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. The best thing about this debate was that dog.
Sorry about that. He just came.
I loved it.
Yeah, that's
Thank
my
you so
beautiful
much.
moment.
Bye.